Winter is coming. When I first got to America, it was in the middle of the summer, and it was hot and humid, kind of like Texas today. I arrived in Chicago, got into the car, and thankfully, there was air conditioning in the car. See, back in Kenya, I'd been used to when it's hot, you roll down the window, and then as soon as you see a dust cloud coming your way, you quickly roll it up and just, okay, I'll stand the heat. Well, I got to Michigan, and the reason I was going to Michigan, I was pursuing my master's degrees in literature and education, and I'd also been offered a position to teach undergrad English. This was my childhood dream come true. Settled down, summer ended, fall came, but nothing could have quite prepared me for what was coming next. When they say winter is coming, they mean winter is coming. And for me, that first winter came with a vengeance. One day it started snowing. It was gentle, soft, serene, peaceful, but it didn't stop. It kept snowing, and it got heavier and heavier, and by morning, the snow was so high, I could not open the door to get out of the house. I could not even crack a window open, and for 4 days, I was stuck in the house. In those 4 days, I questioned, what am I doing here? And how am I going to survive this cold, icy darkness? But I had a purpose to being there. That's where I needed to be. So I prayed, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I couldn't change the weather, but I could change my attitude to become one of gratitude. So instead of seeing and focusing on the coldness of winter, I started to focus my thoughts on the good things that winter brings with it, the blessings that come with it, the adventures of going sledding and cross-country skiing and snowball fights, and the fact that you can spend time with your family sitting by the fire inside the house as you watch the snow fall, drinking a hot cup of chai. Fortunately, winter ends and spring begins, and with it, new life, the birds chirping, the flowers blooming, and the earth warming up to usher in the summer. That's when I met him, the man, the one who warmed my heart and lifted my spirits. We courted for a year, and in that year, we made plans for our future, the adventures that we would have together. He was just starting his program in youth ministry as I was finishing mine. And so for that year that we dated, we made all these plans about how he would go into ministry and how he would go into education, and we'd partner together. By the end of the year, he proposed. I said yes. And so that summer, we flew to Kenya so I could introduce him to my parents, and I let them know that we want to be married by the end of the month. Well, my parents sat me down. They pulled me aside and sat me down, and I remember my dad telling me, Tabby, why don't you just wait for a year? And I was ready to get married. So I said, no, let's get this show on the road. And so wedding plans were made. We had a beautiful wedding. The night of our honeymoon, after dinner, we went upstairs to the room, and I was sitting on the bed, and he asked me to hand him a towel. It was a little bit out of my reach. Next thing I knew, I'd been struck on the back of my head with a flashlight. I was in shock and disbelief. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to go. He apologized profusely, and obviously, I forgave him. And I never told a soul. The honeymoon continued. We had a great time. Then we flew back to Michigan, and things just snowballed from then. The abuse intensified. See, winter is not always a physical thing. Sometimes it's a personal thing. Sometimes we go through situations or are in a relationship, or it could be a job that leaves us feeling cold and icy and in darkness. My personal winter had started. I did not share it with anyone. I kept it to myself. One day, as I was driving home from work, after a horrific morning, I saw an oncoming semi-truck, and I had the thought, all I need to do is swerve just a little bit, and it would all be over. That was my wake-up call. That's when I realized that I had taken my thoughts into such a dark place. So I prayed, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. At the time, I felt that this is where I was supposed to be, not only because I was raised in a strict Catholic home, but I'd also converted to become a very conservative Seventh-day Adventist. And we had made these plans for the future and how we were going to be in ministry together. So I held on to that, and I knew I could not change that. I had to accept it. So instead, I chose to focus on the blessings that my marriage brought, the adventures that we had together, just sitting down peacefully watching a Lakers game. One day I came home and he was so excited. He had just received an opportunity to go and interview for a youth ministry position in Illinois. So we took the trip, the 4-hour trip there. We got to the pastor's house. Now, when he said that the church was going to interview him, I didn't think it was going to be the whole church. Pretty much the whole church was sitting there. And so they introduced themselves, he introduced him, and then it was my turn. And when I introduced myself, as soon as I said that I'm an educator, the energy in the room shifted. And before I knew it, the questions were being directed at me. Oh, what's your philosophy of education? How do you feel about child discipline and homework? For the next 45 minutes, most of the questions were directed at me. The interview was done. We got in the car to head home. I didn't sit in the front. I sat in the back seat because I had no idea what was to come. But on the drive, before we even got to Michigan, we received a phone call from the pastor, and he said, you know what? We want to offer you the job as interim youth pastor, but we also want your wife to become the principal of our school and head teacher. 2 things that I'd never done before. But Richard Branson says, when an amazing opportunity is offered to you and you don't know how to do it, say yes, then learn later. That's what I did. I spent that summer learning what I needed to do. At the end of the summer, his contract had ended. Mine was just beginning. And he told me, you need to quit your job. You need to go back with me to Michigan. I said no. And the abuse continued. One day after school, Keisha, a parent at the school, sent her kids off to the playground, and she sat me down in my car, and she said, Tabby, talk to me. I looked at her and said, huh? Talk to me. I know what's going on. I've been there. You can't go through this alone. Had it not been for Keisha, I would not have had the wisdom to know the difference between the things that I can change and the things that I should accept. And so, with courage, I took the step, filed for a divorce. I lost everything. My car, my house, all my belongings, no money. But winter had ended for me, and spring was beginning. A new life was beginning for me where I now had a career. Winters will always come. We will always experience winters in our lives, but we cannot go through them alone. Keisha helped lift that cloud of darkness that was over me, and I could start seeing the sun rays coming through. Keisha and her friendship allowed me to step up, be courageous to make the changes that I knew I could make. Winter always ends. Spring comes and new life begins.